There's been a great deal of confusion over Bill C-11, which is being widely reported as having passed, leading many to believe it is now law. Last week, I reported that C-11 had passed Senate, but had yet to receive royal assent. Under most circumstances, this is a rubber stamp procedure. However, due to the many amendments which Senate made to the bill before passing it, the bill is now being returned to the House of Commons, where it must once again be passed by politicians. In short, the bill has not passed and is not yet law, and we can hope that it won't be. The Liberals are not happy with the amendments made by Senate and have said they will not vote in favor of the amended bill. Among others, senators made amendments to protect user-generated content. This, of course, was the true purpose of the bill: to give the government the right to censor user-generated content, such as, well, my show, and others that dare to tell people the truth by putting platforms such as YouTube, Rumble, Liberty, and others under the jurisdiction of the CRTC. We can hope this will stall the bill indefinitely, as if the Liberals can't use it to censor the truth, it serves no purpose for them. Everything else in the bill was just window dressing, placed there in an incompetent attempt to hide what the bill was really for. Don't let this potential victory distract you, though. While this is happening, the government is rushing through Bill C-18. The bill was only proposed in April of last year by Turd's Heritage Minister Pablo Rodriguez and has already passed the House and the first Senate reading. To demonstrate the degree to which the Liberal government is rushing this bill, the first Senate reading was on February 2nd, last Thursday. The second reading took place on the 7th, this past Tuesday, just 3 business days later. When I checked on Wednesday of this week, there was no update on whether or not the bill had passed that reading, but I think it's safe to assume it has. A bill seldom passes the first reading and then gets killed in a subsequent reading. C-18 is the flip side of C-11. Where C-11 seeks to silence independent media, C-18 is designed to force social media platforms to heavily favor state-approved media. During a House of Commons debate in December, Conservative MP Brad Redekop said of the bill, "Simply put, this law would force Facebook, Google, and other internet companies to prioritize CBC and other government-approved news outlets on our feed over the smaller alternative news media platforms that may be more critical of the NDP Liberal view of the world." In an extreme example of the pot calling the kettle black, even social media giant Facebook blasted the bill, warning the government it will lead to news content being inaccessible for Canadians. Mark Dinsdale, who serves as Facebook's head of media partnerships for Canada, said, "If this draft legislation becomes law, creating globally unprecedented forms of financial liability for news links or content, we may be forced to consider whether we continue to allow the sharing of news content on Facebook in Canada as defined under the Online News Act." Globally unprecedented. Congratulations, Justin. You get the WEF World Achievement Award for censorship. Legisinfo, the government website where they are required by law to inform us of new tyrannies they are working to pass into law, does not provide a date for the third Senate reading, but we can be sure it will be very soon. I have cautioned you before not to be geocentric in your thinking. The current attack upon our rights and freedoms is global, and violations at the national level are merely indicative of the degree to which our own government is being controlled, and only partly representative of the globalists' overall strategy. I've also reported several times now on how rights violations are being heavily funded by the U.S. Department of Defense. While our own government and the U.S. government are passing censorship laws, the U.S. is also working to implement AIs to control access to content. A recent LifeSite News article revealed that the US government is funding research into new AI-assisted tools with which to suppress dissent on mainstream narratives, such as those regarding COVID-19 vaccines and the origins of the virus. Just the News highlighted grant documents showing how the National Science Foundation, an independent agency of the US government, is funding research into ways to, quote, improve capacity to detect, monitor, manage, and mitigate inauthentic behaviors and misinformation campaigns. Millions of dollars in grants have been given by the US National Science Foundation to universities to develop AI tools that will help identify misinformation or deception campaigns and counter them with truthful information. These tools are very similar to those developed in 2011 by DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency to counter ISIS uprisings in the Middle East. The initial idea was to track dissidents who were interested in toppling US-friendly regimes, or to follow any potentially radical threats by examining political posts on big tech platforms. DARPA set 4 specific goals for the program, which boiled down to detecting counter-US narrative messaging online and automatically suppressing it, while also automatically promoting the official narrative. It doesn't take much imagination to see how they are planning to use this same technology to silence those of us telling the truth, and to make sure that even if we do get our message out, you'll never see it. Unless, of course, like me, you used to be a web developer, and no ways around that kind of thing. Do check out my recent video on the advantages of using a VPN. I will also shortly be producing a follow-up to that video with step-by-step instructions for installing and using a VPN. In addition, I'm currently working with Oliver Ross of Liberty Lives to come up with affordable strategies to protect yourself from censorship. Oliver and I are planning to do a series of interviews on that in the near future. In the meantime, you can check out my previous 9-part series with Oliver on protecting your privacy at ironwillreport.com. Last fall, I reported extensively on the Public Order Emergency Commission and predicted that ultimately the commission will exonerate Trudeau and find his use of the EMA to be justifiable, with the obvious conclusion that this will give the government license to do it again. The commission was originally scheduled to render judgment this past Monday, but they requested and were granted an extension until the 20th of this month. Let's see if we can guess why. First, there's the fact that mainstream media reporting of the commission has been extremely light. What few articles and news segments can be found with a quick online search are either neutral or supportive of Trudeau invoking the act. And according to Angus Reid, about half the people they surveyed responded that they were paying little or no attention to the commission. The government wants it this way. They want people to forget and conclude that it's all behind us now, so that when state-controlled media largely ignores the decision, no one will comment or probably even notice. And for those who are paying attention, when the commission, led by Liberal crony Justice Paul Rouleau, finds that Turd's use of the EMA was justified, they need some data that Trudeau's bought and paid for media can use to spin it and make it sound like the judgment was a fair reflection of the opinion of Canadians. Which brings me to the aforementioned Angus Reid poll, which concludes that 51% of Canadians believe Turd was justified in invoking the act. This despite the fact that public support for Turd and his party is at an all-time low, and that the poll found 73% of Conservatives believe the EMA was a violation of our rights, while 81% of Liberals and 68% of NDPers support the use of the EMA to clear those dangerous terrorist truckers out. Even people who have little knowledge of statistics know that if they polled Liberals out of proportion to the actual number of Liberal voters in Canada, that's going to skew the results. So let's look at the popular vote in the 2021 election. keeping in mind that Turd's approval rating is even lower now than it was then. The Conservative Party of Canada actually got more votes than Trudeau's Liberals, 33.7% to 32.6%. This is why Turd had to make an alliance with the NDP. Even if we add together the NDP and Liberals, they garnered 50.4% of the popular vote, compared to the two clearly conservative parties, the CPC and the PPC, who together got 38.7% of the vote. I'm excluding the Bloc Québécois. While 60% of Bloc respondents said they approved of Trudeau's use of the act, a deeper look at the poll stats shows that they are also paying the least attention to the issue, by a wide margin. In addition, Bloc voters could be either Liberal or Conservative. The only thing they have in common is wanting sovereignty for Quebec, and frankly, I don't blame them. So if the poll wanted to be an accurate reflection of Canadian opinion, then it should have polled people in proportion to how many Liberal versus Conservative voters there are. However, their charts show clearly that of the 4,710 people who responded, only 1,624 clearly identify as Conservative, having voted either CPC or PPC in the last federal election. This means that Conservatives comprised only 30% of respondents, while the 2021 popular vote shows that Conservatives represent approximately 40% of Canadian voters. Something here does not add up. So let's look behind the curtain and see who exactly is conducting these polls. Angus Reid claims to be nonpartisan, but a quick examination of their team page calls that into question. The current president, Shachi Kurl, is a frequent contributor to the CBC, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Globe and Mail, and the Ottawa Citizen, all bastions of nonpartisan journalistic integrity. And John Rowe, their research associate, was a reporter with the Calgary Herald and the Calgary Sun, including an extended stint as an editor with the Herald's weekly arts and life magazine, Swerve. I am a Calgarian, and I can tell you that Swerve magazine was about as woke and liberal as they get. A liberal magazine in Calgary. Amazingly, they lasted 14 years before going out of business in 2018. The final key is when this poll was released. It was February 2nd, just 4 days before the original deadline for Rouleau's decision. Not enough time for mainstream media to spin the story and prepare their brainwashed viewers to accept Trudeau's exoneration and, by proxy, the government's right to do it again. So the deadline was extended to give the propaganda machinery time to prime the gullible to approve of the decision when it inevitably comes. And next time, the Commission, which is required by law whenever the act is invoked, will be even more of a kangaroo court than it was this time. That's all for this week's free version of the Iron Will Report. In the full members version available at ironwillreport.com, ArriveCan 2.0 is coming soon. Twitter is still censoring. We know because they recently censored us. Further proof that both the Canadian and US governments are colluding with the WEF. The green banking bill you almost certainly haven't heard of that could destroy yet more businesses. Our government spends billions on recharging stations for the less than 1% of Canadians who drive electric cars. The truth behind Trudeau's now infamous thumbprint handshake with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Tucker Carlson trolls the NDP, and Simon Fraser University's seminar on climate change anxiety. Interviews coming out next week, an in-depth interview with Jeremy McKenzie, the raging dissident and creator of the meme Diagolon, on his arrest and imprisonment. I am interviewed by US Truth blogger James Roguski on the globalist agenda, and part 2 of my interview with Dr. Mark Trozzi on lies the diet and fitness industry told you. You can get access to my full weekly news reports as well as exclusive interviews at ironwillreport.com for just $9.95 per month with a 15-day free trial.